It's just after Thanksgiving, and it's time for giving some thought to Christmas gifts. This year I'm going to try a cutting board. I've never done a cutting board before. And first thing I did was pick my species. I'm going to do 3 different colors. I'm going to do a hard maple, a purple heartwood, and then a black walnut. And try to do a 3D cutting board, which I've seen done a bunch of times. It looks super cool, so I figured to give it a shot. Gonna do it a little bit larger than I've seen in the past by just doing 8/4 stock, ripped down a little bit. So the first thing I'm gonna do is line up some boards.
So I'll walk you through the process that I used to create the cutting board, but I thought it would be beneficial to discuss what I did wrong. There's probably 1,000 videos on how to create a cutting board online. Maybe not as many on the mistakes that you want to watch out for. So first one is I did this under a deadline. And although I thought I had plenty of time from Thanksgiving to Christmas, it still felt rushed. And it added a level of anxiety to this project that I didn't particularly care for. Woodworking I find is therapeutic, and that took away some of the therapy behind it when there is a deadline that you're concerned about every issue that arises in the process, because you know that whether good, bad, or indifferent, the time is going to come. So that is something I wouldn't recommend. Give yourself, until you get maybe better, more efficient, know what to expect, give yourself unlimited time so you can enjoy the process.
Okay, I now have 2 sides jointed. I've got a face joint and an edge joint. Make a nice 90-degree angle. Next order operation is I'm going to put it through the planer.
The second thing I think I did wrong was I picked the wrong design. Although I really wanted to do this geometric cutting board, and I'm sure there's simpler geometric cutting boards out there, this one proved to be difficult because instead of gluing together a bunch of strips and then cross-cutting them, gluing them together in kind of a butterfly pattern, this one you actually have to glue together a whole bunch of octagonal pieces. That proved to be incredibly difficult. So I think for my first cutting board, I just picked the wrong design.
All right, so during glue up, I made a mistake. On the first one, I didn't tape the outside. And I got a lot of glue squeeze out, which is good. Hopefully it'll prove to not have gaps. But I didn't have a great way to clean it up. Even, taking the clamps off about an hour after, scraping the glue off, still left some residue, and it wasn't perfect. And I figured by the time I glue these up together after I cross-cut them, it's just going to be a gap. It's going to be ugly. So I ran them through the planer, but I ran them in a way where I numbered them 1 through 6 and ran them methodically through, so I wouldn't take any one side off more than another, because I still want to take that shape and have them fit together nicely. And if I took all of it off of one side, it would either be skewed, so the pattern wouldn't look right, or they wouldn't fit together. So methodically ran them through the planer very slowly, and got them all. So they look really good. So now I'm going to chop one of them, get a cross section, and measure to make sure that they're going to fit together here. And then it's on to cutting, and cut a bunch of little pieces out and see what they look like together.
And maybe not as methodically placed through the planer as I had thought.
But you can kind of tell it's a little bit off, right? So you can see that point a little bit further that way, this point a little bit further that way, that point a little bit that way.
So if I were to do this again, I would have stopped there. and I would have identified that one of the three geometric figures was a little bit shy, and I would have planed down the other two to match it. Um, I didn't, and I pressed forward, and it kind of bit me later because there was a gap on every one of those um, geometric figures throughout the entire cutting board. And I tried to cover it up with glue, but it just was too big of a gap. So if I were to do it again, I would have troubleshot that and fix it. The next thing I feel I did wrong, I just made it too thin. This was a bigger cutting board, and I gave myself a little bit of extra material because I wanted the final size to be around 1.5 inches, but I only gave myself like maybe 1/8 or 2. And I didn't do a great job gluing up. I didn't create the appropriate jig to glue this thing up correctly. So I ended up having pieces high, having pieces low. And by the time I got to planing it down, it was all over the place. And I just didn't have enough material to maintain a thick cutting board. So I actually had some gaps on the bottom side where there was just pieces just that were raised, and you could see it from the bottom side. This is a pretty disheartening mistake, and I have to imagine people have been in the same position as me. I got this drum sander maybe 2 years ago, and I really didn't use it that much where I needed the wings that come off of the end of the table. So when I set it up originally, I was really excited, and I never really tuned the outfeed wings. And you can see right there on that top left, it's a little bit high, and it grabs the board and it hangs up. So I found out what a drum sander will do if you raise a board halfway through and it can't push through the sander. It will burn it. And it doesn't burn it a little bit. It's gonna roast and roast and roast. And it was so disheartening to be this far down a project. And traditionally sanding is like one of the finishing touches to woodwork where you're almost done with the project. And to get to this point and realize I just burned a very large line in my project that just happened to be what I wanted to be the top at the time, which obviously changes the fact that okay, there's this big paper towel roll burn in the middle of my cutting board. I guess I'm gonna have to look at that other side. Also amplified the fact that I really didn't have a lot of material to work with, and I had left some parts high coming off of the planer, so I had a lot of work to do on the backside. Next thing I did was I decided not to make juice screws because I've heard horror stories about that. But I did want to do some, places to lift it up, so some hand grooves. And I wanted to get away with the trim router because my one large router was in my CNC, my other large router was in my router table, so I was like, I'm just going to use the trim router to try to get this done. I made a little jig. I didn't get it on camera, unfortunately, but I made a little jig. But the base plate for the trim router just wasn't long enough. So I ended up gouging out a couple spots that could have been avoided with a larger base plate.
All right, moment of truth. I've sanded up. I realized I don't have any large enough tub to give this thing a bath in mineral oil. So I'm gonna have to do the once a day, keep coating it, and see how it does. So give it a try, see how it looks. I'm excited to see how it looks. Just sanded, looks really cool. So,
Which brings me to number 10, which is probably the biggest mistake I made. Not making a second one for myself. Now granted, I gave this one to my sister. She absolutely loved it. It was a great gift idea. I wish I had another one. I'm jealous that I don't have one, which means I may have to make another one with lessons learned. I would say if anybody is trying to do this for a commission or to make money, I feel like unless you get down to really working out the scale and automating some processes or really scaling some processes, it would be difficult to charge the amount of hours it took to build something like this. But certainly as a cool gift or something for yourself, or just to expand on your capabilities from a woodworking standpoint, it's definitely a cool project that everybody should try.
Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.